All right, here is the biggest takeaways from the latest news over the past week around technology and business. The first one is going to be the AI construction boom, why it's so crucial when it comes to AI chips and what it means for us and the economy. The second one is going to be around prediction markets, why that's so important and why it's actually a good thing. And the last one is on OpenAI's Code Red and why I think it's pretty important for the industry as a whole, the capex, what happens in the long term. So we'll get straight into that. But before we do, if you like any of the content, give it a subscribe or a like. And also, we do a newsletter as well. It's called Alpha Bytes, and we go deeper into some of these news and insights. So if you want to get the latest, subscribe. The link is in the description below. All right, so let's get straight into it. The first one is on the data centers and the construction boom. And I think this is really important because it clearly shows that we're in some sort of cycle right now. And AI chips aren't going anywhere. AI isn't going anywhere as well. What we're seeing here is a huge rush of workers coming into this industry. And what it reminds me of is the whole idea of, like I think it was like 15 years ago, uh, there was this massive mining boom in Australia. And it just reminds me of and what happens when something like this occurs. And for the most part, you're going to see a lot of folks coming into this industry. There are going to be project managers, electricians, all the tradespeople. These are blue collar workers. And in Australia, there was this mining boom where everyone was moving to one part of Australia to, mine iron ore. And we saw this because China, the demand for iron ore was just astronomical. And so we're seeing sort of the rinse and repeats of this type of boom in the AI industry now. And if you clearly look at sort of this is a paper from the Reserve Bank of Australia. And one thing I want to sort of showcase here is sort of the effects of the mining boom. And this is going to be comparable to the effects of the AI boom is sort of just what happens to real household per capita disposable income. And you're going to be seeing this increase in the number of people earning more money, but also as the money trickles down into the economy. So a lot of these people will be getting more money, more jobs, and more productivity will go up. And so I think this is one of the really positive things about these types of booms. But the thing to be concerned about is how long it will last for and the amount of investment that goes into these booms as well. And I think this speaks to the amount of investment that OpenAI is throwing into these types of infrastructure plays, not just OpenAI, it's NVIDIA, it's Oracle, and all the above as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like from that perspective. But the other thing is really just, as I mentioned, right, just the sheer amount of money coming into this industry right now. And this is sort of like, this is a pretty popular graph. There's many variations of this, but you can see this sort of exponential increase in technology, in investment, and also in cash flow. But the thing that I'm kind of interested in is the discrepancy between capital spending and operating cash flow. I think there's going to be a lot more investment, but the question we have to ask ourselves is what is going to happen when we don't have enough cash flow to meet that capital expenditure? And this is sort of speaks to that AI. Are we in a bubble at the moment? It remains to be seen, but I think there's just this sort of rush right now for people to move super fast on this industry and seeing exactly how these hyperscalers, the Alphabets, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, Oracle, OpenAI, how they will deal with the shortage in capex between operating cash flow. I think companies like Google can offset that because they have other vehicles for revenue generation. But if you are an OpenAI and banking basically your entire revenue on capital expenditure and backing on venture capital investment as well, there's going to be a point where the rubber hits the road, and it's going to be interesting to see how these companies survive in the long term. One thing that I want to do sort of point out is sort of the energy side of things. I wrote this kind of interesting piece on the newsletter, so you should subscribe for sure. But just really just giving you a take on the sheer amount of energy that's going to be required for building these data centers. And energy is becoming much, much more important now, just in terms of just sort of like the increase in demand, but also just like what is happening to the types of energies being used, and versus the renewables versus the traditional sources of energy. So I think there's going to be a significant um, push for different types of energy sources to contribute to these data centers. The other aspect of this is sort of, as I was speaking to the whole idea of the sort of the data center construction boom, the one aspect to not forget is the national security side of things. And this is why I think that building centers, on home soil is going to be such a critical move here. I think the US is doing this also, more importantly, from a national security standpoint. They're trying to become much more energy independent, but also more manufacturing independent as well. That's why they're trying to separate themselves from Taiwan and become much more reliable on themselves and more self-sufficient at the end of the day. So I said, I wrote this article a while back, just to showcase, the sheer dominance of Taiwan when it comes to semiconductor production. I'm not going to go through all of it today, but you can clearly see that TSMC, the biggest semiconductor producer in the world, has the lion's share for a lot of these semiconductor chips, and they work with a lot of American companies, Nvidia being one of them. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how the data centers come together, the semiconductor chips come together as well, especially on home soil in the US. And I think this is going to be, a positive thing for the US, but also, what does it mean long term in terms of their relationship with Taiwan and other players in that space that are overseas. All right, so that's the first story. The second story is prediction markets. I wanted to talk about prediction markets because this is going to be sort of the long term, the long tail end of what this looks like, because people assume that companies like Kalshi and Polymarket are sort of betting platforms, and I think in a sense they are. You can wager things, and you can win big money as well. But I think the underlying sort of narrative here and where this is going is sort of this real-time prediction of future events. And I think most people don't understand that. I think when you look at the way that the world works right now, these types of markets are kind of lagging indicators, sort of pre-prediction markets. So I'm really interested to see how these prediction market works in predicting political events, in predicting sort of very benign events too as well. Like, okay, maybe is the CEO going to get fired, or maybe a sporting team, things like that. So, but I think the underlying tone here is that these markets are going to be much, much more popular because one, it gives an incentive for people to join this marketplace. It gives them incentive to win big money as well, but it gives the sort of the wider community and society a look into what is happening under the hood when it comes to predicting these things. It's when you put money where your mouth is, it becomes a great incentive to do proper due diligence. It makes you uncover truths that weren't there previously, especially when money is at stake. And I think this is going to be a huge, huge player when it comes to what this looks like. And I think the other aspect of prediction markets is the idea of insider trading. Insider trading has always been frowned upon, and I think that's for good reason. I think with Kalshi and Polymarket now, and probably new players coming into this prediction market space, um, insider trading is going to be not necessarily a bad thing, I would say. If you have insider knowledge, that could probably skew sort of the odds in your favor, but it also gives you a sense to steer the market in your favor as well. And I think this is a great example of what happened here. And I'll read it out verbatim. Okay, so A Google insider has officially been exposed on Polymarket. This dude just profited $1 million in a single day betting on the Google search markets. Google accidentally pushed the results early, then removed them, but not before it revealed the when he went 22-23 on his bets and ballooned to 3.9 million open positions. This isn't a lucky streak. He previously made 150K predicting the early release of Gemini 3 before results were out. At this point, it's obvious he's a Google insider milking Polymarket for quick money. It's one of the wildest things I've ever seen on the platform. So this is not going to be uncommon anymore. Anyone can come on these markets and bet and make predictions and win and lose money as well. So if you know insider information, there's nothing stopping you from from participating in this market. Unlike the traditional stock markets, being an insider is actually quite illegal. But this is going to open the can of worms to see exactly, what does this look like, especially for prediction markets, as sort of this type of technology innovates, gets better, becomes more real time. I'm really excited to see what this looks like. And the last story is on OpenAI's Code Red. So I don't think this was unexpected. I think this was inevitable, especially when you've got players like Google coming out of the woodwork and just completely dominating the model space, at least for now. Uh, but I see that OpenAI is now really taking it up a notch, and I think they're doing this in sort of the right capacity, if that makes sense. Most people don't realize that Google had their own code red moment as well. I wrote about this extensively in sort of this deep dive, Never Bet Against Google. You can read it. It's completely free on the newsletter. But most people, yeah, don't know that Google had their own code red. They realized this back in the day when ChatGPT first got released, and they realized that, oh crap, we're really behind here. And so that's why Sundar really rallied the troops a couple of years ago just to really figure out what next moves were. And I think one of the biggest moves Google did during this code red moment was sort of combine Google Brain and Google DeepMind as well. And this is sort of where, you had Google Brain. They were sort of like pragmatists at the end of the day. Google, and then you had also DeepMind, which is Demis Hassabis's sort of brainchild, and they merged, and that was sort of the beginnings of what I could see becoming what Google is today, and what the way that they structured themselves, the culture that they developed as well. And I think OpenAI now is starting to realize that they need to have their own code red moment. Otherwise, they're going to be blown out of the water. The other aspect of this that people don't really mention is that Google has other sources of revenue, right? So they've got search, they've got YouTube, they've got Google Cloud. So it's not going to be a bit of a hit if Gemini gets overtaken again, or if they lose AIRS. I think that's not going to happen. But if it does, Google's definitely not going to bite the dust anytime soon, because they have other sources of revenue to rely on. OpenAI is different. They rely exclusively on their LLM models. This is their sort of cash cow. This is the thing that they're relying on, and this is why they've raised so much money, is because they're banking on these their GPT models to really take the cake here. But as we start to realize, that the cost of accessing these models is becoming so cheap now, it's trending towards zero. So you and I can sort of access these models. We can switch between models if we need to. So why should we pay a subscription fee to OpenAI when we can easily switch over to Gemini or Grok or other models as well, even the open source models? So I think OpenAI are starting to realize this, that they need to create, a very, very great model, a world-class model, but they need to build products around these models too, because people are not going to just rely on these models as a sort of subscription. They need to work with certain products that are part of that ecosystem that can build stickiness for these types of consumers to use. And if Gemini was to come up with a better model, they wouldn't easily switch because they've been baked into the OpenAI's ecosystem. And I think OpenAI haven't realized that just yet until now. And I think this is really crucial for them. And it's going to be a real inflection point moment for 2026. And I think when you start to realize the sort of push and pull between a lot of these players, this is sort of going to be a question of who gets there first, but also when they do get there first, how long are they going to hold that podium for? And now we're seeing sort of this sort of like tug and, uh, you know, tug of war battle between the incumbents, the Google, OpenAI, Grok, even the DeepSeek uh, Chinese models as well, the open source models, uh, Kimi. So I think OpenAI is starting to realize that they really need to make more moves here, and they need to be able to figure out what happens after this. And I think that's why they're putting all of those things on hold. So that's sort of the wrap up of everything. Hope you like all of that stuff. If you do want to go into more detail, I definitely have the uh, newsletter here. Take a look at it. I go into deeper insights into the AI side of things, the intelligence problem. The weekly newsletter at the bottom here, deep dives into NVIDIA, the satellite connectivity landscape. So it's very technology driven, but it's also at the intersection of the physical world and the digital world. And I think that's where we're all heading. So with that, hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, give it a subscribe and like, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.